And welcome back to my channel, unless you're new here, and then just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and sometimes not. And this is my masterpiece spotlight, where I spotlight some non-horror movies in my collection that I think are masterpieces, for one reason or another. And going the entire opposite of Mommy Dearest, we are going to do the other kind of biopic that's 99.9% true, as opposed to only 10% true, and that is The People versus Larry Flynt. Now, believe it or not, I have been rather political in my life. Not as much now, because, life is too short for all this shit, man. So Larry Flynt, believe it or not, is one of my heroes. Larry Flynt is one of the most patriotic heroes of the United States in its history, is a pornographer named Larry Flynt. And, I didn't get up that page that I need. I'll need this page for some of the discussion. Okay. So, The People vs. Larry Flynt was released in 1996. It stars Woody Harrelson and Courtney Love, who is in one of my favorite grunge bands, Hole. Courtney Love, her solo career, and Hole. I love Courtney Love. That's cool. Anyway, it stars Woody Harrelson, Courtney Love, and Edward Norton. So that's three people I really, really love right there. So it's a great cast. And it was directed by Milos Forman. It was written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. And it stars, like I said, Woody Harrelson, Courtney Love, and Edward Norton, and released in 1996. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes long, which, I love a long movie. So, yes. So, what is this movie about? Well, this movie is about the people versus Larry Flynt. Larry Flynt had one of the most, in the end, Larry Flynt had one of the most impactful Supreme Court rulings ever in the history of the United States. And that was when he countersued that piece of shit, Jerry Falwell, and took it all the way to the Supreme Court and won. And I loved it. I love it. So this movie was made with the direct involvement of Larry Flynt. Larry Flynt was right there for the adaptation. It was his life story, backed up by all of the proof, because everything was done so publicly. You can look any of this stuff up. So Larry Flynt was born in the backwoods of Appalachia, in the Appalachia backwoods, and he ran moonshine. So, it starts when he's a kid. Him and his little brother run a moonshine still. And they go around to the people in the mountains and pushing their little cart and selling them bottles of moonshine, for $2. And that's how they made it. So you get to see them doing that, and it's all kind of cute. They come back, though, and the moonshine door is blocked, and they know that their daddy's in there, so he, kicks open the door, and he, hits his daddy in the head with a moonshine bottle, and the dad, starts shooting at him with a shotgun. He wasn't really trying to hit them, but, he just did get clobbered, and his brother, Jimmy, asked him, was like, well, why did you hit him like that? And he's like, because he was drinking up my my profits. And his little brother was like, you shouldn't do that. People are going to think you're crazy. And he's like, I'm not crazy. I'm just trying to make an honest buck. If you can consider selling moonshine an honest buck. So that kind of sets up Larry Flynt's personality. So then we are introduced to him grown up now, played by Woody Harrelson. And he's running these strip clubs called the Hustler Clubs. And he's not really getting anywhere like he wants to. And it's also seedy. But, he's running these clubs, trying to figure out how to be more than what they are. And that's when he comes up with the idea for a newsletter to advertise the club. And it's like, well, you can't advertise that because, it's the 70s and there's laws, you can't do that. But he goes and does it anyway, and the printer tells him, it's like, no, you can't just say this is our strippers at the Hustler Club. You have to have text. It's gonna be like Playboy. You can't just have nothing but pictures. So voila, we get the first Hustler newsletter. Then it becomes really popular, people find it and all, and they stop him and asking him, can you get a subscription? And he's like, that gives him an idea. Now right here is where he meets Courtney Love's character, which is his wife, Althea Flynt. So Althea shows up, and she is right underage, and he spots that, but they end up getting together and falling in love. And so you have this very interesting love story between Larry Flynt and Althea Flynt. And Courtney Love is phenomenal in this movie. So he comes up with the idea to try his hand at a magazine. Well, the only difference is Larry Flynt doesn't want to be like Penthouse and Playboy. He wants to be worse. He wants it to be real, and so you have a lot of scenes where they are I think one of the funniest scenes is when they're doing a photo shoot for the first issue, and the photographer is trying to photograph it like Playboy, all fuzzy pictures, and you can't really see too much, and there's this big speech where he's like, no, you shoot it like this. And, the photographer is like, you can't show that. And he's like, why not? Don't complain to me, complain to the manufacturer. So he puts out this Hustler magazine, and it is quite shocking, only 25% sell through, right? And so he basically is pushing the limits, and they're like, well, we've only got the money for one more issue, when a stroke of luck comes. He gets a phone call from the Greek islands from a photographer who asked him if he would be interested in naked pictures of Jackie O. That's Jackie Onassis Kennedy, the wife of John F. Kennedy. And he's like, for real? And he's like, yeah. She's just buck naked, walking around, see everything. And I took pictures. Now, a side story about that, it was her own husband that set that up, Onassis. He was cheating with Maria Callas, that famous opera star. And so him and her had a very tumultuous relationship. So he knew when she was going to be on that island, and he's the one who tipped off the photographers that if you want to see Jackie, to humiliate her. And so that was a side story that's really pretty bad. But this photographer contacted him, and that issue, because Larry was brave enough, he put it out in the next issue. Jackie Onassis nude. This sold millions of copies, making him an almost instant millionaire. This poor boy from the Appalachians ends up, so he ends up with like a mansion with 24 rooms, and you see all of this hedonism, which is, really cool. But he also starts getting in a lot of political trouble because you have decency, all of the suspected suspects, all of the usual suspects. These right-wing conservative people are picketing him and stuff like that. And then you have the actual political people with power, prosecutors and scumbags like that, who start arresting him. They actually arrest him for just publishing the magazine. And we then begin this series of true life court battles. Now, during the first trial, Larry Flynt himself, the real Larry Flynt, plays the judge. There's a lot of Easter eggs in this movie as well. You have a lot of really progressive, what you would call liberals, left-wingers, who are playing the right-wingers in this movie. It's sort of like a ironic joke. And Larry Flynt plays the judge that put him in prison the first time. So there's like an interesting scene where Woody Harrelson, as Larry Flynt, is on the stand in front of the judge, who is the real Larry Flynt. So it's amazing. And it also shows you how much Larry Flynt had to do with this movie. He even plays a part in it. He plays the judge that put him in prison the first time. So he was actually sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, during this time, of course, Edward Norton's character had come in and had been hired by Althea and became their lawyer. And even though he didn't really care about, he wasn't like a fan of his pornography, he was a First Amendment rights advocate, attorney. So he was very interested. It was like his dream client was to be someone who keeps getting in trouble for constitutional issues like Larry Flynt did. So Edward Norton is absolutely phenomenal in this movie as well. So these court cases keep going on, and he keeps winning them, and, stuff like that. Now, what you see in the movie is every once in a while it will show you this weird guy who seems to be like stalking. He just like shows up at court and stuff like that. Well, when they appeal, what was it? Some news, it was in Georgia. Some news people were being arrested for selling Hustler magazine in their newsstands. So he went down there and intentionally got arrested to take it to court, because that's what you do, to test the Constitution and make people abide by it. So he gets arrested and goes to court for it. Now, right as he wins that court case as well, he's walking out with his attorney, and they are shot by this asshole across the street who shoots Larry twice and the lawyer once. So both Ed Norton and Larry Flynt was shot. Now Larry Flynt was paralyzed from the waist down, which is pretty ironic considering what he is and what he did. So that was pretty, and of course it made him a very angry and bitter individual, because he's trying to liberate, he's trying to stand up for the Constitution, he's trying to do all of this, and society, the right-wing culture basically, has now paralyzed him from the waist down. This starts a series of unfortunate events, and that is that because he is left in absolute agony and pain, he becomes addicted to pain medication. Unfortunately, this causes Althea, who is having to take care of him, to see his reaction to being dosed up And so she starts doing it herself, becoming addicted as well. Now, 4 years they spend basically in a drug-fueled haze, locked away in their millions and millions of dollar mansion, because his business continues on, even though this has happened to him. And believe me, Larry Flynt Publishing is like worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So they live in this lavish mansion where they basically sit behind a bank vault. Their bedroom is like a bank vault with like buttons you can mash and surveillance systems, because who wouldn't be that way after you got shot? So they spend basically 4 years in a bedroom shooting up. However, the doctor comes in and tells him, like, this stuff's going to kill you if you don't stop. There is a certain surgery that's going around now that's been discovered. And so Larry Flynt does this surgery, and it takes all the pain away. And when he wakes up from that surgery, he never touches drugs again. This, of course, freaks Althea out, because Althea can't understand how you can be addicted to drugs for 4 years. And he tries to explain, I'm not taking it for the same reason you are. I took those drugs because I was in agony. I'm not in agony anymore, so I don't need those drugs. So he tries to get her off of them, but he can't, because while he's trying to take care of her and her drug addiction, he's also being sued and having to constantly go to court. And now that he's pissed off, he's really after the establishment, because he ain't got nothing else to do, right? He's in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. His former life, if you know what I mean, is over. So he decides to become an absolute pain in the government's ass by taking everything to court, showing there's nobody that has made so much spectacle and circus in courtrooms as Larry Flynt did. So he continues to do that, and then they do the big thing. And that is, they made a Campari, which is an alcohol, a liquor. They made a Campari ad that was a parody of Jerry Falwell. And Jerry Falwell saw it. Jerry Falwell got so upset, took him to court. He ends up winning that partially. He was not, he couldn't be charged with libel, because I think Jerry Falwell sued him for like $40 million. And the courts and even the jury said, no, you're a public figure and people can make fun of you if they want to. However, we will give you $200,000 for emotional distress. So he won the big part, and Jerry Falwell won this little tiny part. Well, Jerry Falwell, being Jerry Falwell, he ends up, making a big deal about how he won, which he really didn't. But he won. He got his $200,000. Now, in the meantime, you have probably one of the most saddest scenes ever, because not only has Larry Flynt, one judge put him in a mental institution for 9 months because of his behavior in the courtroom, which was he was just being a smartass, is all he was doing. But the judge was so mad, and this was the DeLorean, which is a very famous incident where the FBI tried to entrap John DeLorean and filmed him supposedly making a gigantic cocaine drug deal, but it was all a setup. And Larry Flynt got the video and gave it to CBS, who filmed it. Who showed it. This caused Larry Flynt to be taken to court again, with them demanding to know where he got that tape. Obviously, it was from the FBI. Someone in the FBI was a whistleblower, and they sent the tape. They gave the tape to Larry Flynt. He gave it to CBS, and they ended up, exploding that case because John DeLorean was entrapped by FBI agents. That's the kind of trouble that Larry Flynt was causing the government. So his behavior in the court, because the judge kept saying, we want to know who done that. And he's like, I don't have to tell you that. See, journalists don't have to tell you where their sources are from. That's unconstitutional. So Larry Flynt refused to tell him where he got that tape. He puts him in a mental institution for 9 months, during which Althea, who is still messing around with drugs so much, she has to come and tell him. It was very, very sad, but she got AIDS from shooting up. So he has to straighten up and get out and take care of her. That's when this Jerry Falwell thing happened, was while he was in a mental institution, which was just punishment. He wasn't really crazy. He was in there as punishment. So he gets out, though. He straightens up enough to get out, so that he can take care of her and deal with this Jerry Falwell issue. So he won, like I said, he won that. But then you have this super sad scene where Althea is finally going downhill. And that scene in which he tries, he gives her a ride on his wheelchair, to the bathroom. And she is so deathly ill. And he calls the doctor when she goes into the bathroom. He calls the doctor and is asking, we've got to do something. Isn't there an experimental drug or something? What are they doing in Europe? Then he notices water underneath there coming out the door, and he goes in there, and Althea is dead in the tub. That scene makes me cry like a fucking baby. I mean, it's like when it gets close to that scene, I always like, where's my towel? I need a rag because this is fixing to happen. And it doesn't matter how many times that I see it, I always bawl like a fucking baby because Woody Harrelson's reaction just breaks your heart. Now, after Althea's funeral, he is sitting there in bed, miserable, very sad, and he sees Jerry Falwell doing a sermon about AIDS, where Jerry Falwell is saying that everybody that has AIDS deserved it, that it was a plague sent by God to get, drug addicts and gay people, is basically what he said. It was horrible, horrible. Well, Larry Flynt, when he heard that was a direct insult to his wife, right? He picks up the phone and he calls his attorney, and he was like, I want to appeal that little part of the decision that Jerry Falwell won. He lost the other big part, but that little part that he won, the emotional distress, the $200,000 that Larry had to pay him, I want to appeal that. And, the lawyer was like, I'm not really into this circus court thing of yours anymore. And I'm scared to do that. I think the Supreme Court would hear this case. But if you're going to show you, I'm not going to have you showing your ass in front of the Supreme Court. So he agrees, and he says, I want to leave something behind that is truly meaningful. And so he agrees, and he goes to the Supreme Court. He appeals it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, rules in favor of Larry Flynt. And to this day, that Supreme Court precedent is what allows journalists and people to not be sued because you say something about somebody that they don't like. You can call Madonna whatever you want to. She can't go to the court and go, they called me this, they called me that, and it made me cry, so I want $3 million. No, the Supreme Court said that you are a public figure, and if people want to talk ugly about Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Jerry Falwell or Larry Flynt or anybody else, that if you step out and become a public figure, you open yourself up to public ridicule, and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it, because we have a fucking Constitution, and the Constitution says free speech. Okay? You can't engage in hate speech, I can't go out there and try to convince a group of people to kill you, but I can go out there and tell everybody that I think you're a pig. And if it makes you cry at night because I say that you're a Nazi, you know, so what? It's America. I can do that. You can call me whatever you want. I can call you whatever you want. So Larry Flynt won the Supreme Court case, and the movie ends with it saying the perpetrator has never been brought to justice. You know, the guy who shot him and his lawyer. That is not true anymore. They did catch the person who did it. So if you don't happen to know, there was a serial killer named Joseph Paul Franklin. Now, Joseph Paul Franklin, now interestingly enough, in the movie there is a scene, and it's very prophetic. There's a scene in the limousine in which, you know, because remember, Larry was all mad and after the government because he was shot, and they still haven't never found who did it. So Althea and his lawyer and Larry and his brother and some of his friends, they were all in this limousine, and people were like throwing around a couple of, you know, like, who do you think did it? Well, I think the CIA did it because you offered $1 million for the assassinator of John F. Kennedy. And then Althea, so they have these like different people saying, I think these did it or these did it. Althea actually says, I think it was the interracial photo spreads, and it was the KKK who did it. She was wrong. It's not the KKK, but she was right. Joseph Paul Franklin was a serial killer who was active in the 70s and 80s, and he killed a bunch of people. He went after interracial couples, is what he did. He was a serial killer. Like I said, he was a white supremacist, and he went around shooting interracial couples. He was sentenced to death row for murdering this guy in 1977. He shot both of them, but only the guy died. But he got the death penalty for that. And he was executed in Missouri in 2013. He was responsible for over 20 other murders. He was a serial killer, like I said. I've seen a documentary on him. I've seen an interview with him and stuff. So, in 1978, that's the guy. And that is why he shot Larry Flynt. He had stalked Larry Flynt because Larry Flynt's magazine, Hustler, on occasion, had interracial photo spreads with a white guy and a black woman. Or a black woman and a white guy, yeah, or a black man and a white woman. But so, throughout the history of Hustler, during that time, there was a couple of times in which they had interracial photo spreads. This white supremacist started stalking him, and he was indeed shot, like Althea said, for those interracial photo spreads. Now, when the guy was caught for that, because he confessed to that, Larry Flynt actually didn't want him killed. Larry Flynt wanted him to spend it. He was not a proponent of the death penalty. So he actually would preferred, Larry Flynt opposed his execution, stating his belief that the government should not be in the business of killing people, and that he would feel better knowing the guy was suffering in prison for the rest of his life instead of getting the death penalty. However, you know, he was executed in 2013. So even though this movie ends, this movie was filmed before Joseph Paul Franklin confessed to being the shooter. So it ends with that line about the shooter had not been caught, but now we know who it is. And Larry Flynt, before he died, was aware. Like I said, this was 2013 when he was executed, so it was years before that he had confessed to shooting Larry Flynt. So there is an answer at the end of the movie when it says that he was never found. It was. He was killed, or he was shot by a serial killer named Joseph Paul Franklin, who was executed for a different murder. So either way, at least there was justice for what had happened to Larry Flynt and his lawyer. So why is this movie a masterpiece? Well, because I'm politically connected to it. You know, I mean, Larry Flynt is a hero, a political hero of mine. And I think he did I think he is a true patriot. I've got the, I've got the special edition of the DVD. This is the special edition DVD that I had. I was very, very thankful to get to upgrade it to Blu-ray, so I'm very happy to have it on Blu-ray. But this is the really cool DVD. It's Woody Harrelson in an American flag diaper, which is one of the tricks that Flynt did in court. He actually came to court wearing a flak jacket, and then when he took the flak jacket off, he had on an American flag diaper, just like that. So yeah, I'm definitely keeping this because it's a collector's edition with a collector's edition slipcase, and I'm glad to have finally got it up on Blu-ray. And that was The People vs. Larry Flynt. I'm sure there's a lot of right-wingers who despise him. But we who believe in freedom and the Constitution love Larry Flynt. Might not like his magazine, but I certainly like what he did with the John DeLorean case. I like what he did fighting against these right-wing crazy censors who wanted to stifle the Constitution. So he is a hero of mine, and this movie is a masterpiece. The performances by Woody Harrelson and Ed Norton and Courtney Love is just, I'm pretty sure this movie was I think it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I don't know how many it won or anything like that, but yeah, so that's The People vs. Larry Flynt. Let me know if you've seen it. It is an absolutely fantastic movie and masterpiece performances. And I will see you in the next one. Love you, miss you, bye-bye. Always remember, never forget, you're a very, very special person. Even if you haven't sued the government all the way to the Supreme Court to protect the Constitution. Bye-bye.